the barrel of the gun pressed against 6-year-old Lily's temple as tears streamed down her face. "Don't move or she dies," the masked man screamed, his hand trembling with dangerous unpredictability. The bank lobby fell silent except for Lily's quiet whimpers. While other hostages cowered in terror, James Parker, a single father who'd already lost everything once before, looked directly into his daughter's eyes with an expression that defied understanding. His unexpected calmness in that moment would not only save lives but inexplicably shatter the carefully constructed walls around billionaire CEO Alexander Reed's heart, a man who had spent decades believing vulnerability was weakness, until he witnessed true strength. If this story already has you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Your support helps us continue sharing these emotional journeys that remind us what truly matters in life. 3 hours earlier, James Parker had been rushing through his morning routine, a well-choreographed dance of efficiency he'd perfected since becoming Lily's sole parent 2 years ago. The kitchen of their modest 2-bedroom apartment was filled with the scent of slightly burnt toast and the sound of Lily's cheerful chatter as she colored at the table. "Daddy, do you think Ms. Wilson will like my drawing?" Lily asked, her small fingers clutching a purple crayon as she added final touches to what appeared to be a lopsided unicorn. James glanced at the clock. 7:42 a.m. They were already running late. Again. "She'll love it, Lilipad," he assured her, pouring coffee into his travel mug while simultaneously checking his phone for client emails. As a freelance graphic designer, every missed message potentially meant missed income, and with rent due next week, he couldn't afford to lose any projects. "But you didn't even look at it," Lily pouted, her lower lip trembling slightly. James set down his phone and coffee, kneeling beside his daughter's chair. At 34, his face already showed lines of exhaustion and worry that hadn't been there before his wife's death, but his eyes softened as they always did when focusing on Lily. "You're right, and I'm sorry," he said, studying the colorful creation. "This is definitely your best unicorn yet. The rainbow mane is especially magical." Lily beamed, her mother's smile momentarily illuminating her face, sending the familiar pang through James's heart. Caroline had been gone for 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days, taken by a drunk driver on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday evening, but grief still ambushed him in these small moments of recognition. "Okay, backpack time," James announced, shaking off the melancholy. "We've got a big day ahead." Indeed, it was a big day. After dropping Lily at school, James had a meeting with a potential new client whose contract could provide financial stability for months. Then he needed to visit the bank to secure a small business loan to upgrade his aging computer equipment. If everything went according to plan, he might finally stop living paycheck to paycheck. But as James had learned in the hardest possible way, life rarely followed plans. Across town, in the penthouse office of Reed Enterprises' 60-story headquarters, Alexander Reed stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, surveying the city that had become his kingdom. At 45, he had built one of the country's most successful investment firms through ruthless determination and an uncanny ability to predict market trends. "The Westlake acquisition papers need your signature, and the board is waiting for your decision on the Shanghai expansion," his executive assistant, Vanessa, recited from the doorway, tablet in hand. Alexander didn't turn from the window. "Tell the board I'll have my decision by end of day. The Westlake papers can wait until I've reviewed the final projections." "Sir, the deadline is a negotiating tactic," he finished, finally turning to face her. "They need this deal more than we do. Let them sweat." Vanessa nodded, accustomed to his tactics. "Also, your ex-wife called. Something about changing the visitation schedule this weekend with Emma." A muscle twitched in Alexander's jaw, the only visible reaction to the mention of his 12-year-old daughter. "Tell Diane that the schedule was set by the court. I'll see Emma on Saturday as planned." She seemed quite insistent. "That will be all, Vanessa." After his assistant left, Alexander returned to the window, his reflection staring back at him, impeccable in his tailored suit, not a silver hair out of place. The image of success. Yet the mention of Emma had cracked his carefully maintained composure. The divorce 3 years ago had been messy, public, and painful. Diane had claimed he was emotionally unavailable, married to his work rather than his family. The courts had granted her primary custody of Emma, leaving Alexander with alternate weekends and the hollow victory of his empire. His phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, First National Bank, 11:30 a.m. As chairman of the bank's board, he made quarterly visits to key branches. Today's visit was purely ceremonial, a chance to shake hands, boost morale, and remind everyone who was in charge. Alexander preferred numbers to people, spreadsheets to small talk, but public appearances were part of the job. He straightened his tie, locked away thoughts of his daughter, and prepared to play his role as the untouchable CEO. By 11:15 a.m., James had already experienced a morning of extremes. His client meeting had gone exceptionally well, resulting in a 6-month contract that would ease his financial worries. Buoyed by this success, he'd decided to stop by First National Bank before picking up Lily from her half-day at school. "We're going to celebrate tonight, Lilipad," he said into his phone as he walked toward the bank's entrance. "How does pizza and ice cream sound? Can we get pineapple on the pizza?" Lily asked, her voice tiny through the speaker. James laughed. "Your fruit obsession is concerning, but yes, pineapple it is. And chocolate ice cream? Is there any other kind?" he replied, their familiar exchange bringing smiles to both. "I love you to the moon, Daddy," Lily said. "And I love you to the stars and back," James responded, ending the call as he entered the bank's grand lobby. First National was housed in a historic building with marble columns and a soaring ceiling. Despite modern security upgrades, it maintained an old-world elegance that made banking feel like a dignified affair rather than a mundane errand. James joined the shortest line, mentally rehearsing his loan request. At the same moment, Alexander Reed entered through a private side door, accompanied by the branch manager and several nervous-looking executives. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere, employees straightening their postures and lowering their voices as he passed. "Customer satisfaction scores are up 4% this quarter," the branch manager was saying, "and our new mobile banking platform has exceeded adoption projections by..." Alexander raised a hand, cutting him off. "The numbers were in the report. What I want to know is why this branch's commercial loan approvals are down compared to last quarter." The manager swallowed visibly. "Well, sir, with the economic uncertainty, we've been applying slightly more stringent." "More stringent than my approved guidelines?" Alexander asked, his voice quiet but sharp. "No, sir, of course not. It's just that." The explanation was interrupted by a sound that would change everything, the crash of the front doors being thrown open, followed by a man's shout. "Everybody down. This is a robbery." Four masked figures burst into the bank, brandishing weapons. The leader fired a shot into the ceiling, sending plaster dust raining down and screams echoing through the lobby. "On the floor. Now. Phones in front of you," another robber demanded, waving his gun at the terrified customers and employees. James dropped to his knees along with everyone else, his heart hammering as he placed his phone on the marble floor. His first thought wasn't of his own safety but of Lily, grateful she wasn't with him, devastated at the thought of leaving her an orphan. Alexander and the bank executives had been near the teller counter when the robbery began. Unlike the others who immediately complied, Alexander remained standing, his expression one of disbelief rather than fear. "I said down." One of the robbers rushed toward him, shoving him roughly to the floor. Alexander's face flushed with anger at being manhandled, but a warning glance from the branch manager beside him kept him silent. This wasn't a boardroom where his word was law. For perhaps the first time in decades, Alexander Reed was not in control. The next 20 minutes unfolded in a blur of shouted demands and terrified compliance. The robbers forced the bank manager to open the vault while keeping the hostages corralled in the lobby. They seemed organized but increasingly agitated as time passed. "The silent alarm must have been triggered," one robber muttered to another. "We need to move faster." "Shut up," the leader snapped. "Stick to the plan." James remained motionless on the floor, his mind racing through scenarios, searching for anything that might help him survive this. He noticed Alexander Reed a few feet away, the CEO's face a mask of contained fury rather than fear. The relative order of the robbery began to unravel when police sirens wailed in the distance. "They're here already?" One robber panicked, moving toward the windows. "Stay away from the windows, idiot," the leader shouted. As tension among the robbers escalated, the bank's front doors opened, and a small figure slipped inside. "Daddy?" James's blood turned to ice as he heard Lily's voice. He raised his head to see his daughter standing in the entrance, her backpack still on, confusion on her face. "Lily," he gasped. "How?" Later, he would learn that school had dismissed early due to a water main break. The teacher, knowing Lily's father was just across the street at the bank, had allowed her to go to him rather than wait for the emergency childcare to be arranged. Now, as one of the robbers grabbed Lily roughly by the arm, James felt the world collapse around him. "Who the hell is this?" the robber demanded, dragging Lily toward the group of hostages. "She's my daughter," James said, rising to his knees despite the guns pointed his way. "Please, she's only 6. Let me have her." The leader strode over, grabbing Lily from his accomplice. "Sit down or I'll shoot you both," he threatened. Lily began to cry, her small body trembling. "Daddy, I'm scared." "I know, Lillipad," James said, his voice remarkably steady despite the terror coursing through him. "But remember what we practice? Our special breathing?" The leader looked between them, then made a decision that would alter the course of events. He pressed his gun against Lily's temple. "Don't move or she dies," he shouted, addressing not just James but all the hostages as police sirens grew louder outside. The bank fell silent except for Lily's quiet sobs. Alexander watched as James Parker, a man he'd never met, whose name he didn't know, faced the most horrific scenario imaginable. What happened next defied explanation. Instead of begging or panicking, James took a slow, deliberate breath. His eyes locked with his daughter's, and his expression transformed into one of absolute calm, not resignation or defeat, but a centered presence that seemed to fill the space between them. "Lily," he said softly, "look at me, sweetheart. Just at me." The little girl's eyes, wide with terror, found her father's. "Remember our special place? The beach where we went with Mommy?" Lily gave a tiny nod, the gun still pressed to her head. "I want you to hear the waves with me. In and out. In." James took a deep breath, and out. He exhaled slowly. Incredibly, Lily began to breathe with him, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with her father's. "That's my brave girl," James continued, his voice steady and warm, as if they were alone in their living room rather than in the middle of an armed robbery. "Feel the sand between your toes. Hear the seagulls. In and out." The robber holding Lily looked increasingly unsettled by this exchange. "Shut up," he demanded, but his voice lacked conviction. James ignored him, maintaining eye contact with his daughter. "The sun is warm on your face. The water is sparkling blue. In and out." Lily's crying had stopped. Though still trembling, she was focused entirely on her father, breathing in the pattern he'd established. "What the hell are you doing?" the robber demanded, confusion evident in his voice. For the first time, James addressed him directly, his voice still eerily calm. "I'm helping my daughter stay calm so she doesn't make any sudden movements that might make you nervous. I'm trying to keep everyone safe." The simple logic of this statement seemed to momentarily confuse the gunman. Alexander Reed watched this exchange with growing astonishment. In boardrooms and negotiations, he'd encountered every type of crisis management technique, but he'd never witnessed anything like this, a man finding perfect clarity and calm in the worst moment imaginable. "You're wasting time," James continued, his voice reasonable rather than confrontational. "The police are outside. Every second you spend threatening a child is a second you're not using to escape." The leader, who had been conferring with another robber, approached. "What's going on here?" "This guy is doing some weird breathing thing with the kid," the gunman holding Lily explained, sounding almost defensive. The leader studied James's face. "You trying to be a hero?" James shook his head slightly. "I'm trying to be a father. My daughter is scared. I'm helping her breathe. That's all." Something in James's steady gaze made the leader pause. He glanced at the windows, where police lights now flashed visibly. "We need hostages to get out," one of the other robbers urged. "The kid would be perfect." "No," James said, his voice still calm but with an undercurrent of steel that hadn't been there before. "You take me instead." "Daddy, no." Lily cried out. "It's okay, Lillipad," James assured her. "Remember what Mommy always said? Brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you're scared." Alexander felt something shift inside him at these words, a recognition of a kind of strength he'd never valued or understood. The leader seemed to be weighing his options. "Why would I take you instead of the kid?" "Because I'll cooperate completely," James said. "No resistance, no problems. But a terrified child is unpredictable. She might panic, run, scream, create complications you don't need right now." The logic was sound, and the leader knew it. After a tense moment, he nodded to his accomplice, who released Lily. "Daddy," she cried, running to James. He embraced her briefly, whispering something in her ear before looking up at the robbers. "Let her go to that woman," he said, nodding toward a bank teller who had been watching the exchange with tears in her eyes. "Then I'll do whatever you need." The leader hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Kid goes to her, you come with us. Anyone tries anything, we start shooting." As Lily was guided to the teller, who wrapped protective arms around her, James stood slowly. "Keep breathing, Lillipad," he called softly. "Just like we practiced. I'll see you soon." Alexander Reed found himself holding his breath as James walked calmly toward the robbers, his hands raised slightly. The single father's composure was so complete, so authentic, that it made Alexander acutely aware of his own carefully constructed facade of control. What happened next occurred with stunning speed. As James approached the leader, police burst through the bank's side entrance. In the chaos that followed, shouts, gunfire, people diving for cover, Alexander found himself moving without conscious thought. He lunged toward Lily and the teller, shielding them with his body as bullets flew overhead. Through the mayhem, he caught a glimpse of James tackling one of the robbers who had turned his gun toward the hostages. Then something struck Alexander's shoulder, a burning pain that knocked him to the floor. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was James Parker's face, still impossibly calm even as blood spread across his shirt. Alexander awoke in a hospital room, the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell confirming his location before he even opened his eyes. When he did, he found his ex-wife Diane sitting beside his bed, their daughter Emma asleep in a chair by the window. "You were shot," Diane said without preamble. "The bullet went through your shoulder. You'll recover fully, but you lost a lot of blood." Alexander tried to speak, found his throat dry, and accepted the water Diane offered. "The bank robbery," he managed after drinking. "What happened?" "It's all over the news," Diane replied. 3 robbers captured, 1 killed. 2 hostages injured, you and another man." Alexander's mind immediately went to the single father. "James," he said. "I've written the beginning of an emotional story based on your title." The narrative opens with a tense hostage situation where James Parker, a single father, displays remarkable calm when his daughter Lily is threatened during a bank robbery. His composure catches the attention of CEO Alexander Reed, who witnesses true strength in crisis. The story establishes both main characters, James as a struggling single father after losing his wife, and Alexander as a successful but emotionally disconnected businessman dealing with the aftermath of divorce. Their worlds collide during the bank robbery, where James's ability to remain calm under extreme pressure and his connection with his daughter makes a profound impression on Alexander. I've included the hook for viewers to like and subscribe at the beginning, and started developing the emotional depth of the characters. The story was cut off due to length limitations, but I've established the foundation for a compelling narrative that could continue with Alexander's recovery, his growing connection to James and Lily, and the transformative impact this experience has on all their lives. Would you like me to continue the story from where it left off, or would you prefer I focus on a specific part of the narrative?